Greetings everyone. I am Omkaar Pattanayak, the founder and president of the Global Federal League. In today's edition of the Global Perspective, we have with us Dr. Rasmus Tenbergen. Dr. Tenbergen is a co-founder and board member of Germany-based International World Federalist Organization, Democracy Without Borders, founder of the World Parliament Experiment, executive leader of the Institute for Leadership Development, a negotiation expert, a social entrepreneur, and a veteran of the movement to unite the world into a global democratic federation. Rasmus has a MA in Public Administration and Public Management from Harvard Kennedy School and has earned his doctorate from the Faculty of Philosophy, RWTH Aachen, his dissertation themed on the Kosovo War. He co-founded the Global Week of Action for a World Parliament in 2013 and is serving as a member of its coordination team currently. So, firstly, Dr. Tenbergen, it's an honor to have you with us. I was looking forward to this interview since long, and I'm especially very impressed by your work, both in the academia as well as in the practical world. So, that's a rare combination to come across. A lot of people they keep on writing articles and papers on the idea of a world federation, but we see very minimal presence of their ideas in the practical world. But seeing that you're both active in the academia as well as in the practical world with Democracy Without Borders and the World Parliament Experiment, it's a great idea in my opinion.
Thank you very much, Omkaar. I'm happy to be here and I admire your work for our common cause. So I'm glad if I can make a contribution to your project.
Sure, that would be great. So, so every world federalist I come across, this is the first question I ask them. How did you end up becoming a world federalist, and how would you define the idea?
Yeah, for me, it's a logical question. I studied political science and in particular international relation. There are two grand theories in international relation. One is the so-called realism that I don't find so realistic. And the other one, this is more my position, the liberalism, that is, in my opinion, more desirable and even more suitable to describe the world based on collaboration of international actors. And I think if you, so I'm very much in favor of collaboration between countries or even within a continent, the European Union. I think that's a great progress that we have in Europe compared to our past. But if you think one step further, I don't think that should be the end of the development. If you think that collaboration between countries and international institutions are a good idea, the logical last step is, of course, a world federation. And a federation means putting something together that belongs together. And I think in times of globalization, everything is globalized. So we should also globalize democracy and international collaboration. It's an interesting thing in Germany. We call federalism or almost the opposite, that the small units in the country are also important. And for me, this includes both aspects. I'm very much in favor of worldwide laws and the development of international law to world law. But I also believe in subsidiarity, that everything should be decided as local as possible. But some problems are so important that the lowest possible level to decide this, for example, protection of the environment on a global scale, we need the global level. And that's why we need a world federation in some form, in my opinion.
So you propose a system where we have a top-down approach, like we have a world government at the top, followed by the national governments, followed by the provincial or the state governments, and then we have the district governments or the municipal governments, and then cities and rural administration institutions.
Mm-hmm. The more, the better. I think in global democracy or in world federalism, we need both the top-down and the bottom-up approach. And in In Democracy Without Borders, we also follow both approaches. So I'm not the main person inside the Democracy Without Borders. I helped to co-found it, but more in a supporting role. But I support all the different approaches here. For example, the campaign for United Nations Parliamentary Assembly. This is more a top-down approach, the main project of Democracy Without Borders, but we also have more bottom-up approaches, for example, the World Citizens Initiative, or a global voting platform, the World Parliament Experiment. That's the project that I really founded, and that is my main responsibility. So I think global democracy should be a combination of both top-down and bottom-up approaches.
We'll have a couple of follow-up questions in that successively, but prior to that, how would you describe the job of a social entrepreneur, and how is it different from a conventional activist or a civil society worker?
I think the main difference is if you're an entrepreneur, your main objective is to make money. The more, the better, and this is the objective of your endeavor. If you define yourself as a social entrepreneur, there are other factors that are important. What are the social effects of what I'm doing? So, for example, as a negotiation consultant, which is my main job, I do not only ask what is the maximum value in this negotiation for me or for my clients, but also what are other effects that these negotiations have. And I encourage people to take that into account and to maximize what you think is the best social value in the interaction.
So currently, shouldn't we be having businessmen and the current entrepreneurs that we have transitioning from just mere entrepreneurship to social entrepreneurship, because businesses determine a lot about society and like they have a very significant influence over people. So shouldn't we seek to encourage social entrepreneurship in them?
To avoid a misunderstanding, I do not criticize other entrepreneurs. I think it's very good for the economy and for society in general if people start businesses and so on. So it's just my individual decision. I'm so interested in politics and other aspects that I would like to combine all my interests in one job, and that's one reason why I go in this direction.
That sounds interesting to me as well, and I look forward to exploring more about this career, and maybe I'll end up becoming a social entrepreneur sometime in the future.
I would certainly support that.
Germany today is one of the strongest hubs of the world federalist movement. Democracy Without Borders is based out of Germany. The president of the YWF, Esten Mackag, is a resident of Berlin, and they have a very strong presence in the country. The Young European Federalists and the European Federalists are also very prominent in the country. So what, in your opinion, contributed to the emergence of Germany as a very important part of the movement?
It's that is right to a certain degree that many of the World Federalist activities are going on in Germany. We have to say, though, that in general, our movement is still a small movement. It was a much larger movement after World War II, when many famous people joined the world citizen movement, but today it is still a small movement, and even in Germany we are a small movement. But of course I work together with the Young World Federalists and Esten here in Berlin and other organizations, in particular Democracy Without Borders, which is also still a small organization. But I'm glad, I think, compared to its size, Yeah, I think one can say it has a positive influence on things. The reason, maybe one reason is, of course, Germany's history, because in Germany's history, I think we saw probably the worst example of the bad effects of nationalism. So in a certain way, what we are doing here is the opposite to nationalism. And this may be a reason why people in Germany are receptive to a certain degree to these ideas. But I wish they would be much more receptive, and there's still a long way to go for our movement to convince more people, even in Germany.
Best of luck with that. You are already doing a great job with it, and especially democracy without borders, the approach that I've seen. Also, a follow-up question to that: how would you distinguish between patriotism and nationalism?
Um, I think patriotism in general is a good thing. You can be a local patriot if you like your city. For example, I like Berlin because it has such an interesting history, good and bad aspects, of course. I would even say, as a world federalist, I'm still a patriot and like aspects about my country. Of course, not all aspects in the history, as I just said. And you can be a world patriot if you love the world as a whole. The problem with nationalism is that it is a negative expression about other countries. I think nationalists say my country is better or more important than other countries. So for me, that would be the difference. I don't see any contradiction between being a world federalist and a patriot on certain levels.
As someone with an extensive academic expertise in political sciences and the allied disciplines, how would you evaluate German democracy, and what are some salient features of German polity?
I think at the moment we can be grateful that we have the best system in Germany that Germany has ever had during its history, both inside Germany and in collaboration with all its neighbors, to live in friendship with all its neighbors. I think that's a great thing, and even the state of the German democracy is good in general terms. I still wish it could be more advanced in certain aspects. And for Germany, it's a challenge now to find its role, especially given the current crisis in Ukraine. I think Germany has to take more responsibility in international affairs, and we just had big discussions and big decisions within the German government to change its role, even in a military sense, to spend more money for defense. That's a big decision, and I think it is important given the problematic development that we see in the world at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But as a world federalist, of course, I would always say that this should be done in collaboration with other countries within the European Union, and beyond that, with the United States, and even more. I would even say that it is a root cause of current conflicts that even the Western countries have not were not creative enough in giving other countries, including Russia, a good option to collaborate on an international level. Even China, I think if we would offer China collaboration based on democratic principles in the international arena, it would be much more likely that China itself could democratize. Yeah, there are many people. So if you believe in one person, one vote, they would earn a fair share and need to get that. Similar to your country, India, which is a great hope, the world's largest democracy. If I may say that, I was sad to see that in the General Assembly, when there was a vote on the Ukraine question, that India abstained. I put a lot of hopes in India's role in international democracy. So I would also be very interested in your views on India's situation and India's role in these issues.
India, in my opinion, is it's continuing with its principle of non-alignment that was propounded by the founding father of India's foreign policy, Jawaharlal Nehru. So we're carrying forward with that. I would say that the current situation, it has been escalated from both the ends. So Russia clearly is Russia clearly has done something which cannot be justified by anything. So I would say to some extent, NATO has provoked the Russian Federation, and in my opinion, the status quo should be restored as soon as possible. Countries like India, by abstaining, they have prevented this thing from further escalating, because that would have led to further polarization of the world, and we would have entered into a Cold War sort of situation. But then again, as somebody who's just started the study of international relations, not even formally international relations, but just world politics. So I'm in the final year of high school, so I have a lot more to learn and to understand. So I would say that, in my opinion, I would agree with India's stance, but I would like to know more about it.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting to hear and to hear your position. So I would disagree on the question that this was provoked, because I think ultimately it's the right of the Ukrainian people and not the decision of Russia to what security system they choose. So I think as a liberal Democrat, we cannot tell the Ukrainian people that the decision where do they belong to is made in Russia. So for me, that is an important distinction. I would, though, as I said before, say I don't think it was provoked, but sadly it was not developed well enough to countries even like Russia to give them a good option to join new international institutions. There's this development to democratize the world. So I think it's very good if countries have an incentive to become democracies. And I think the role of India is very, very important in this development. And my personal opinion is India should not be neutral. India should be an example of good governance and good development of democracy. We really need that. I think we need India as a leader in this moment, in this movement. That's the reason why I was sad about the abstention that India made in this question in the United Nations. But it would be interesting to continue to discuss this, but this is not our main topic today, probably. However, I would say it has a lot to do with the questions we are discussing here as World Federalists.
Exactly. So, like you have some very well-informed opinions, and I would still say that I have some different opinions, but then it would be a great discussion, and maybe we could catch up sometime later and have a greater discussion on this. It would be
Yeah,
amazing.
very good. Yeah.
So, could you
In democracies, it's also important to agree to disagree sometimes and to do this in a constructive manner.
exactly,
Mhm.
like it's a diversity of opinion that would bring us to a better and more informed opinion in the end. So if something changes, or even if something doesn't change, at least we have a different thought and we feel that, okay, we have given the other side a hearing, and after that we are convinced about our standing. So it's important to be exposed to other ideas as well.
Mhm. Yeah, I do not claim that I have all the answers to all the questions of international politics, but I find it important that we at least try to make proposals how to solve the questions. And I think that the World Federalist movement um, in general, they have very good proposals and they should be implemented. However, I have to say the World Federalist movement as such is not very united. I see contributions from members of our movement with which I strongly disagree. Some of them are very much even in favor of Vladimir Putin's approach at the moment, and there I have to say I strongly disagree. This is and will be a challenge for even inside our movement to have a good and constructive discussion and solutions that we can offer.
So a similar question, like something associated to this, we are looking forward to a world federation where we'll possibly have constitutional monarchies and like a lot of countries that are in democracies still. So how do we convince them to become democracies first and join the federation?
I think most people are already convinced and would like to live in democracies and are Democrats. The problem is that in many countries, let's take China as an example, they cannot decide themselves. So I don't think the big challenge is to convince ordinary people that they want to live in democracies. My guess would be that they probably would like to do that. But it is how do we create the circumstances in which they can freely express their opinion, and in which we can even change, make countries more democratic. And in this, culture plays a role, the economy plays a role. The most important thing is to give good examples. If we live in a democracy, it does not mean that everything is perfect. So the better we solve our problems within our democracy, the more likely is it more countries will become democratic. This is a system competition to a certain degree that we see at the moment. Some people are fascinated by the economic strength of authoritarian regimes at the moment. And I can understand that to a certain degree, but not very much, because I think the downsides are so important that we should certainly not go in that direction.
Also, authoritarian economies, they don't sustain over a long time. Like there's some point of time when they collapse, and that's happened with all authoritarian economies. So I quite don't understand the argument that authoritarian countries have better economies.
Mm. Yeah, that's right. I think in the long run, I also believe that free economies are stronger, but we have to acknowledge that some developments, that China is strong at the moment in a certain sense, and we have to deal with it. And as I said, if we take the example China, the best way to to deal with China, in my opinion, would be to create good proposals for global democracy so that in the future a democratic China can find a good place in the international system.
Absolutely. So, could you please elaborate on your role as a negotiation expert? Is it associated in any way with law and arbitration, or is it something different?
It is different. I work with lawyers and people who work in the field, but generally I'm a consultant to companies, to buyers and sellers, project managers. I consult churches and unions, football clubs, everybody who negotiates, startup entrepreneurs. Sometimes this relates to legal aspects, but sometimes also simply it's a simple price negotiation. All aspects that are concerned with negotiations are defined as joint decision making everywhere where people make decisions together. And of course, I'm especially interested in the political negotiations.
That sounds like a very interesting job.
It is actually. I feel blessed that I can do this this job, and I get so many impressions from many different companies. Big companies in Germany, Mercedes-Benz is one of my clients, or Siemens, and small companies, new companies, and old companies, and even in the public sector, companies. I consult governments in their negotiations, and non-governmental organizations. So this is a very satisfying job, especially if you see it as a social entrepreneur and try to advance what you think as a positive social effect.